Hello everybody, welcome back to the Advanced Vape channel. Before we even get started, I'm just going to apologize in advance if there's a bunch of noise in the background because it's storming really bad outside. There's tornadoes or whatever out there, so it's kind of coming and going, and so if there's a bunch of noise, that's what it is. So today we're going to be looking at the GAIA RDTA from CTHULHU Mod. So this is kind of a small modern style Genesis RDTA. I think it's about 25 millimeter diameter, and it has both bottom and side airflow, and I'll just kind of take it off here and talk about the design just a little bit. So fairly small capacity on it, but quite a bit of airflow for it being as small as it is with the Ultim drip tip there. I'll go on and take this off. And here is the bottom airflow section. Pretty small bottom airflow. And the side airflow works very much like the Velocity RDA. So it unscrews to get bigger, kind of increases into a pretty large Cyclops style airflow. So I really like that feature. Not all, but most RDTAs out there right now are kind of just side air or just bottom air, and this one does both. So as you can see, pretty big Velocity style deck. You can fit really big builds on here. This is a 3mm staggered staple build, so really quite a big wire for fitting into this pretty small atomizer, and no issues there. As you can see, there's tons of clearance to go bigger. But I stayed at 3, so it would be right over the airflows there. And this center section here is actually how you refill it. And I'll talk about that a little bit more when we get further along, but this is probably one of my favorite features about this tank, and there's a couple reasons why. So aside from that, you can also take this pin out and put it on like a squonk setup so that you can fill from the bottom, and it comes out these holes here. There's one here and one there. So you can do the squonk thing, or you can fill through this center hole, right where the center pin would normally be. So let's go on and get through the dry fire really fast, and then I'm pretty excited to talk about some of the other things going on with this tank. Alright, that looks good. So let's go on and zoom back out, and we'll wick it really fast. So unlike other RDTAs, wicking this one is super simple and super fast. If you look back at some of my other RDTA reviews, you can see that I kind of have to fiddle with it a little bit. So it's not really the case with this one. So we'll go on and zoom out and speed through that. And I cut it right to about where that O-ring is. So I just kind of stuffed them in there without too much concern. Alright, and that's it. We're good to go. So like I was talking about earlier, there's the center pin there, and I'm using that to refill. So on other tanks, like maybe the Azeroth, it has this side fill, so you would basically be filling in something that looks like that, but a little bit bigger. And that had a lot of problems. It would often kind of get jammed up and clogged up with juice and start spitting back out, and it just took a while. So with this center thing, you just kind of stick your dropper right there, and you kind of feel it slide into that little depression. And then you can push it, and you can see air coming out of one of those little channels on the side, and that's okay. You need to be careful not to push it too fast, or else you're going to get some leaking out of the airflow. But the coolest thing about that is that you can do it while the top is on. So you just kind of find that notch. And every now and again I'll miss it. I'll feel like it's in there and not, and it'll come out the juice flow hole, or the bottom air holes. So that is a possibility there, but for the most part, it's not too hard. And I really just absolutely love being able to fill it without changing anything. I'm just putting it down there like that and filling it. And that's it. It does need to be refilled pretty frequently because it's a small tank, but it's just so easy to fill that it really doesn't matter. I absolutely love being able to put the dropper down there. So that does have a couple drawbacks, though. If you're using one of those juice bottles with just a little tiny plastic tip instead of a glass dropper, you're going to have some trouble, and you'll have to take the top off. And if you're using one of the ones with like a big nipple on it, you're probably not going to be able to use that to fill this unless you're just really patient with it. So that's not really exclusive to this. There's a lot of different tanks out there that can't be filled using that particular type of bottle, which has kind of gotten more popular with juice companies lately. But it's not an issue exclusive to this. There's lots of tanks that I have that I can't fill with those. Probably the most glaring would be the VCST. So basically anything but a glass dropper can't be used on that tank. So I think we're ready to give this a try. I've got this at about 105 watts, and I'll have this upper airflow closed down a little bit to about there, and the bottom airflow all the way open. So the first thing that hits you is that there's plenty of airflow there for whatever build you want to do. I have this closed way down, and if I opened it all the way up, it's extremely airy. Normally with this type of design, you would expect there to be less airflow than there is, but there's quite a lot. My next impression is that the flavor is absolutely excellent, completely top-notch, and probably the best out of every RDTA that I've used. It goes, honestly, head-to-head with all the other RTAs that I always put at the top of the list. So normally when you watch a video lately, it's been, hey, this has good flavor, but it's not as good as the Modfather or the Aromizer Plus or whatever it may be. And I really can't do that to this tank. This tank has absolutely excellent flavor. No complaints whatsoever, and probably the best performing with this build that I've put in there out of any RDTA or RTA that I've reviewed lately. So it absolutely stands neck and neck with the Modfather and the Aeromizer Plus and all those other tanks that I really like and still use on a daily basis. So I was thinking when I first got this tank just about the design of it, and I was thinking if it fills from this center hole there, right down there, then if I turned it upside down, would juice come pouring out of there? It kind of seems like it would come out of these holes and just pour down, but it doesn't. And I'll show you what I mean. When I turn it upside down, let me see if I can catch it on there. If you can see, there's air bubbles coming out of there. So that little channel there from that center hole to these fill holes in the tank seem to serve two purposes. One is to get juice down in there when you're refilling it, and the other is to kind of transfer air. And as this air pocket gets bigger, the juice is forced down into the wicks. So to me, that's an extremely clever design, and it ultimately ends up in it not leaking even though you hold it upside down for a while. As you can see there, I just held it upside down for a while and it didn't leak. And it keeps those wicks extremely saturated. So I've had no issues that a lot of other RDTAs have, as far as a lot of them wick just to the point where they're not dry hitting, but it's really close. They're just barely keeping up, you know. And this is not like that at all. This stays saturated like a dripper. And I mean, this modern kind of Genesis style RDTA have gotten way better with the wicking speed lately, and it always surprises me a little bit, but this one has been the most efficient that I've used so far. So I've noticed having it wicked how I do, just having it angled to use it. You know, I'm just holding it sort of like this to vape it. That's generally enough to keep them saturated. I don't really have to turn it upside down unless I want it to saturate just a little bit more. But it's not an absolute necessity like it is with some other RDTAs. As you can see, I'm just straight up chain vaping it, and it still feels like a dripper who just, it's on its second drip sort of thing. So very saturated, but not too saturated. If you can't tell from listening to me, I really like this tank. A couple things that if I'm going to come up with cons, it's sort of a pro and a con, is that center fill port. To me, that's a very big pro, to be able to just put the dropper down the chimney there and refill it. But like I was talking about earlier, with some juice bottles, it's not going to work. And there's some times when I'm just trying to do it quickly or not being super careful, and I'll miss with the dropper, or the actual dropper is just a little bit too big to not sit in that notch, and then you push the rubber piece on the dropper, and you see juice pouring out of the bottom airflow thing, where it just didn't get in the right spot in that groove. And it's just sort of one of those things that happens with this tank. And I've noticed that across all juice bottles, the glass droppers are not always the same size. You'll get ones that are really fine point and others that are really wide. And if you get one of those really wide ones, you have to be really slow with refilling this. So kind of a con there, but overall, this fill method is a pro to me. I just really love not having to take it apart to refill it. You don't have to take the top off at all. So if you like the RDTA design, I absolutely recommend this and the Pindad RDTA, which is another review that I have coming up. So those two are my favorite RDTAs right now. With this one allowing a little bit bigger of a build, the other one is much smaller. And I'll talk about the differences a little bit more in that later review. But for this one, I could absolutely recommend this. There's really not any big reasons why I would say don't buy this. It has a good price. Very well made, and the flavor is absolutely excellent. So it's just an all-around recommendation from me. So that'll bring us to the end of this review of the GAIA RDTA from Cthulhu. If you like this review and our channel, give us a like and subscribe. And as always, if you have any questions, leave them below in the comments or send me an email. Thanks.